It's hard, actually. What do you think? Do you think Godzilla's a sentient being? Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I'm Tina. Today I am doing a one-off book review of my old school science fiction copy of Doris Piserchia's, I think that's how you say it, The Fluger. So first I want to apologize for A, the lighting, B, the weird angle, and C, the fact that I've got a bunch of whiskey bottles behind me instead of books. So I was going to film my video and it turns out the city is like tearing up the road outside my house, so there's this really loud, annoying buzz happening, and I really hope that it's not on this video because I've had to go into the basement. So I wish the city would like let you know, but of course no, that would cause social and economic chaos if they were to warn you that they were going to come to your house, you know, and just dick around in the street for 4 hours. Anyway, rant aside, I'm going to talk about The Fluger. So, as usual, I'm going to do a review of the book as a whole without any spoilers, and then I'm going to talk about then I'm going to do a deep dive into the book at the end where I talk about a lot of spoilery things and some of the interesting things about this book. There's a lot to talk about this book, surprisingly. So The Fluger is from, I usually check this, but I forgot, 1980. So this book is, how many years old is that? 40 years old? 40 years old. I found this book at a used bookstore for $1. It was definitely worth the price of that. It's worth way more than that. I would have paid probably $5 for this book. So I actually filmed a review of this book like a year ago, back when I first started a channel. I had like another channel, but the reviews were such trash because I was trying to be like super professional, but I don't know why, because I'm talking about like The Fluger. So they're really stilted, so I'm redoing it. And given how much I actually love this book, despite only giving it like 3 stars, I still remember most of it, so I only had to like reread a few parts. So anyway, what the hell is this book? Why is it? What is this? What is this little creature? What little creature? So, the plot. There is an oversized, extremely strong, extremely resilient, extremely angry alien creature. He leaves his planet as a stowaway and he arrives on Earth. This is obviously set in the future. He wreaks havoc on this super city called Olympus, killing hundreds of people, perhaps thousands of people, and destroying property over the course of several weeks. The mayor hires this alien hitman, Cam Shar, to defeat the creature because he's at his wit's end. He doesn't know what else to do. This dude can divide his consciousness into like 3 different forms. He's got this human-looking man with silver eyes. He's got a winged creature, and then this giant jaguar-like beast. So the plot also follows this kind of street urchin named Julian as he hunts the animal himself because the animal killed all his friends. There's some side plots too about the mayor and some of his counselors that aren't super relevant really, that I'm not really going to get into, but I might talk about them in my analysis part at the end. It's very reminiscent of like a 1980s horror movie in that there are definitely problematic elements, but it's still a lot of fun, even though some parts are just like, oh God. Anyway, so the super city is a big, important part of the story. It's set up vertically as well as horizontally, so it's clearly like an expansion of like something like New York. There are power reactors and things they call L's, which are elevators that run over it. People don't cook anymore. Apparently they just eat at these vending machine-like kitchens. And then if people commit a crime, they are banished to the untamed wilderness outside the gates. I don't think it's actually like a wasteland kind of thing. I think it's just people just only live in the cities. I'm not sure where they get food to fill these vending machines, but someone's got to be making it. Anyway, the people are essentially locked into the super cities as well. They can transfer from one city to another, which is part of the plot later on, but it's not very easy to do. So you're kind of stuck, and most people, it seems, don't have the resources or the means to make these kind of lateral moves. They're kind of stuck where they are. There's clearly a lot of poverty in this super city. So this book does kind of sound like a Godzilla-like romp, but it really isn't. It's extremely serious and at times disturbing, even for me. Usually deaths in, big city monster movies are off-screen. People die when the building falls over, that kind of thing. But Coronado, which is the name of the creature, he's described as like tearing people apart, like regular, normal people just living their daily lives. Usually I'm not fond of regular, normal people. I like to kind of live in my house. I would be fine being like a misanthrope living in the woods as long as there weren't any spiders in my cabin. But the ambivalence and hatred, which is an odd pairing, but he kind of has it's just the only way to really describe it. The ambivalence towards life, but his hatred of people that Coronado has, you know, it's quite unsettling, actually, and I think it's supposed to be. There is this part where Coronado, this is like a minor spoiler, is heading towards the sections where the children live. Apparently all the children live in one section, and thousands of people literally just like throw themselves at him to be ripped to shreds simply to divert his path, just to protect the children. And with a kid myself now, I can totally understand their panic. That scene is pretty crazy, and like, I mean, I read this book like a year and a half ago, and I could still tell you a lot about that scene, and it's just, it's so fascinating, this book. So there's no clear kind of hero or protagonist of the story. Julian is somewhat, but we don't learn a lot about him other than the fact that he's 13 and he grew up homeless. Cam Shar, the alien, is also not the main character, surprisingly. We learn mild facts about him, but nothing too deep. It's unfortunate because he's super, super cool. He is super cool. And, you know, the way we're told of his shape-jumping abilities is well done, but I wish we'd just gotten more of it, you know? I just wanted more of these people. As I said, the novel's quite fascinating because we get to see inside Coronado's head as well. She's able to explain his kind of instinctual rationale quite clearly. Like, he is a creature. He's not a person in the sense that I guess he's like on the borderline of sentient. It's an interesting kind of, I'm assuming he is a monster kind of like Godzilla. Like Godzilla, I wouldn't say is sentient, but Godzilla does have, it's hard, actually. What do you think? Do you think Godzilla's a sentient being? I don't think so. Like, is a T-Rex a sentient being? No. But Godzilla, I think, is a step up from a T-Rex. Like, are those kaiju from Pacific Rim, are they sentient beings? I don't think so. Anyway, this book raises very important questions about, you know, life in our society. As I said, the action scenes are very well described, and the final sentence of the book is quite evocative, actually. It's very interesting. I'll tell you at the end of my spoiler section what the final words were. There's also some pithy sentences that I liked, like, its empty windows were mouths that told of past glories. Things like that. You know, it served to kind of heighten the serious tone of the book and keep it from just being kind of a weird pulpy book, even though it is kind of a weird pulpy book. Overall, it's an interesting, weird as hell sci-fi from the 1980s. It has this callous approach to violence that is reminiscent of the movies of the time. And but there are these like untapped thematic undercurrents that unfortunately were not addressed. So I give it a 3 out of 5. Though, to be honest, I love it. I give it a 3 out of 5 in terms of like actual, like how well done the book actually was, but in terms of like how much I adore it, I'm giving it like a 5 because I'm always thinking about this book. I don't know. Also, the cover's fantastic. Okay, so that's the end of my actual review. I highly recommend you go and read this book if you can find a copy of it. It's really fun. It's also strange. Anyway, I'm gonna get into my analysis section of the book. This was a fun one because there's a lot in here, a lot. This book is weird and it's got lots of problematic elements to it, which I love talking about. So on top of the technology, which I'm going to briefly mention because there's not a lot in this, we have vigilante justice and race, and we have women to talk about. There's a lot of things in this book, as I said. So first I'm just going to talk about the technology. There are some, as I always do, there are some fun futuristic ideas, but nothing is too much in detail. Like the city is described, you kind of get the gist of it, but it's not like, you know, neuromancer description. So they call TVs TEVs for some reason. I'm not sure why you need to shorten TV, but anyway, there's no Wi-Fi in this, no concept of Wi-Fi. Apparently there was a huge tidal wave in 2020. We got COVID instead, I guess. Sorry if that was a callous joke, but that was really all the tech in this book. There's not too much really. It's kind of definitely kind of set in its time. There was a limited amount of focus on technology. To remind you, if you've read this, or just to tell you if you aren't interested in reading this, Cam Shar, the alien thing, ends up killing Coronado by sacrificing the members of the ruling council and some murderer. Anyway, I'll get into that, but first I'm going to say that this is the end of the book. He found himself staring up at the ceiling. He was rapidly losing sensation, so much so that he didn't feel pain in his eyes, didn't know they bulged out of his head like dim light bulbs. His stomach was greatly out of proportion, and in fact his entire body was so heavy that he couldn't crawl. He lay quietly for a while, only to discover that he could no longer move. Soon he wouldn't be able to breathe. A fell leviathan, he lay on the gouged-out tier with his gaze fastened upon the unearthly face of the man who had killed him. That's the end of the book. It's a pretty good ending, really. I really liked it. So as I said, you know, Kamshar ends up killing Coronado by implanting these counselors. Their names are Abard, Cointreau, Garley, Monkwell, and Inestro with this tape, which when Coronado eats it, acts like an expanding foam in his gut, which kills him from the inside. Because they've been trying to kill this creature for literally like 3 months and they haven't been able to do anything. So the thing is, the interesting thing about this is that Kamshar does this to these people without their consent. A person, I think he tried it with an animal, but Coronado wasn't interested because Coronado has obtained a taste for human flesh. So Kamshar does implant it in himself, and one of his 3 bodies does die. But he also implants it, as I said, in the other men, but he does not ask them for their assistance in this regard. His lack of consent for doing this, for forcing these men to sacrifice themselves, is interesting because 3 of the 5 men are really bad men. Garley has this young wife that he treats like absolute shit, and he also beats up that kid Julian. And Nestro is an old man who is very bitter and very much a dick. And Cointreau has been killing people by selling them astral projection drugs that make them jump off of buildings. Yeah, this book is wild. I didn't say that before. This book is wild. Abard the mayor and Monkwell are morally neutral people, though it's never explained, you know, Kamshar could be cleaning up the city as well as killing the creature. This, though, is not extrapolated upon, which is frustrating because if he had been... It's so annoying because that would have been a really, really cool kind of philosophical argument. But it's not really implied that this is the case, that Kamshar chose these people specifically. He could have just picked some random person or someone that was already dying, but I don't know. Another thing that I think is interesting, but I'm not sure if it was an intentional goal of the book, is that I wonder if she's showing that megacities can help us really in the future, that this is not the way we want to go. The reason they can't kill Coronado, at least I assume, is because he's extremely tough, but also because he's embedded in the city now. You know, they can't nuke or even missile him really because it would harm the city and the people in it, because there's so many people in it, there's no way you can actually get them all out. So by creating this insulated life, they have allowed threats like this to feed off of this insulation and to grow. I mean, Coronado could easily, if you want to do like an essay about this book, he could easily be a metaphor. They also have to apply to an outside source, an alien, to help kill the creature in the end. Perhaps this is also a take on xenophobia. I don't know. This book, I don't think it's intended to be that deep, but because it's such a serious novel, it almost feels like it's trying to be. Anyway, I'm gonna move on from that. I can't really dissect this book anymore. So there are people of color in this book, a couple of them. There's Julian, he's black, and the author goes out of her way for some reason to specify that he's not poor because he's black, but something because of circumstance. I'm like, okay, I guess that's good. And Abard the mayor, he's black. I suppose it was as a way to suggest like racial equality in the future, but it's quite heavy-handed and it doesn't feel very normalized. Like Abard has this scene where he discovers that his ancestors were slaves, but does nothing to further the plot or his character development, so I'm not sure why it was included other than to like give him something to do. It's also this weird situation where this man named Roxy, who wants to adopt Julian, and he seems like a good guy, but he's constantly calling Julian this racial slur, and I'm like, I don't understand why if you want to adopt this kid and, you know, you care about him, why you're insulting him all the time. I mean, maybe the author's idea was that in the future, this racial slur for illegal immigrant, you know, would become like a normalized term. I'm not really sure. It was kind of confusing because I was like, why is he insulting him all the time? And why would Julian want to live with the person that does this to him? I don't really understand. Yeah, so there's like some weird kind of problematic elements like that in the book, which I mean, you get with a lot of these books. You get like books from, you know, 40 years ago or more. You always get this kind of weird stuff, but it is kind of fun to look at it to be like, I wonder why this is included, or, well, that's interesting. I'm glad we don't do that anymore. Okay, I'm gonna talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's women. A woman doesn't speak in this book until 66 pages in. I was waiting for it. This is nearly halfway through. It's not a long book. So she's the mayor of Superior, the other city, which is cool. I'm glad that she has a job. But, you know, she doesn't really say much in this scene, and then she does come back later, but all she does is have a conversation with Kamshar where he makes her out to look like an idiot. So I'm like, why? I'm like, okay. She doesn't contribute to the plot in any meaningful way, unfortunately, and she seems tough and capable, but we don't know anything about her, and she's useless. So I don't understand. Like, it's almost like they just threw her in there. One of Abard's assistants is a woman, though she doesn't speak at all. And we also have Cointraux's wife for a brief half a page. We have Garley's mother-in-law for 1 or 2 sentences. She says something, and his wife. Those are the only women in the entire novel. So this book does, like, including soldiers and people trying to attack Coronado and random service people. Everybody is a dude. So this book does not pass the Bechdel test at all. Not only that, but Silly, who is Garley's wife, she's killed in this absolutely brutal way, something to further Garley's plot. Garley is married to an 18-year-old girl. He kidnaps her, he abuses her, and then she is eaten by wolves. Such a feminist text. Such a feminist text. Could not one of the main characters, you know, one of the counselors be a woman too? You know, maybe Julian could have been a girl. Like, I realize this is the 1980s, but this was an example of why feminism was needed. You know, if this were a movie, Celie would have had a larger part, I bet, but she would have been hypersexualized and her death would have included lots of moaning and screaming. Yeah, so it's funny because I'm not like mad about this because I understand it's a product of the time, but it is fascinating to me to look at the portrayal of women in these books because, you know, it's only 40 years ago. Like, this book only came out 5 years before I was born. So what kind of a, you know, example would this book have been to me if I read it when I was 10? Anyway, so despite that, you know, while it doesn't really affect the plot or my enjoyment of the novel as a whole, the book is absolutely terrible for women. On an interesting note, the last time I checked, Doris, the author, was still kicking at like 91 years old, so good for her. But, yeah. That's my take on the Fluger. I hope you enjoyed that. Sorry this video was not as put together as it could have been, but that damn noise outside is driving me crazy and I can't concentrate and it's making me lose my train of thought. My doctor suggested that I have sensory integration disorder, where if there's, you know, more than one, or if there's bright lights and loud noises, I can get very kind of flustered. I'm sure a lot of people have this, and it's you know, it's minor, but I don't like concerts unless they're outdoor concerts. You know, I like small venue concerts, but I don't like big loud, I could never ever go to like an EDM concert. That would destroy me. That would destroy me. Yeah, so this noise in the background in my house is like just driving me absolutely bonkers. So anyway, I'm just like talking now because I'm literally going insane. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed some of that, and read the Fluger. It's good. Okay, bye.